Welcome to Sustainability Soundbites, presented by E&E Leader. Construction escalation clauses may miss real costs. An escalation clause can protect a construction project from rising costs. That protection depends on which materials are covered, which benchmark measures the increase, and what event actually triggers an adjustment. A project owner signs a construction contract with a material price escalation clause. Steel rises sharply. Copper follows. A transformer ordered for the project comes back substantially above the budgeted price. The owner assumes the contract already determines who pays. Maybe it does, but an escalation provision designed around one material, one index, or one type of price increase does not necessarily transfer every new construction cost the same way, a distinction becoming more important for data centers, grid infrastructure, and other equipment-intensive projects because construction inputs are no longer moving together. The Producer Price Index for inputs to new non-residential construction increased 7.1% from June 2025 to June 2026, according to an Associated General Contractors of America analysis of federal data. Contractors' bid prices for new non-residential buildings increased only 3.5% during the same period, a gap suggesting contractors have been absorbing a meaningful portion of higher costs rather than passing everything immediately to project owners. But even those averages conceal the bigger contract problem. Aluminum mill shapes were up 52.4% year-over-year in June, copper and brass mill shapes increased 26%, and steel mill products rose 16.9%. A general escalation provision may not respond equally to all three. The index matters as much as the clause. Price escalation clauses generally need a baseline for determining whether a qualifying cost has actually changed, whether that is the contractor's actual cost, a published catalog price, or an agreed external index. Consensus Docs guidance specifically recognizes those approaches and recommends objective mechanisms for addressing volatile material costs in fixed-price construction agreements. That sounds straightforward until the project's cost structure becomes more specialized. An index tracking steel mill products can measure changes in steel prices, but it does not necessarily reflect what happened to a transformer that contains steel, copper, electrical steel, insulation, bushings, and other components, while also being affected by manufacturing capacity and unusually long lead times. The same problem applies to switchgear, generators, cooling equipment, and other complex systems, whose final prices can be influenced by labor, commodities, tariffs, factory capacity, and supply chain conditions simultaneously. For owners, the important question is therefore not simply whether the contract contains an escalation clause. It is whether the escalation mechanism tracks the cost that is actually changing. Transformers show where the model gets complicated. Transformer procurement makes the distinction particularly visible. Utilities and developers have been securing equipment years in advance as data center development and grid expansion increase demand. Wood Mackenzie's second quarter 2025 survey put average lead times at 128 weeks for standard power transformers and 143 weeks for generator step-up units, with prices up sharply since 2019 amid tight supplies of grain-oriented electrical steel and copper. Those increases do not necessarily follow the price of any one commodity. A transformer could become more expensive even if the steel index identified in a construction contract does not rise by the amount required to trigger an adjustment, and conversely, steel could rise enough to activate an escalation provision even though the contractor already locked in the transformer price months earlier. Timing therefore matters alongside the benchmark. A clause can specify the right material and still produce a different result depending on whether the baseline is tied to bid date, contract execution, purchase order, fabrication, or delivery, and for equipment with multi-year lead times, those dates can be far apart, a scheduling risk that increasingly rivals the commissioning stage delays already showing up on finished grid projects. A tariff clause is not the same as a price clause. Tariffs create another complication. AGC's current contractor guidance identifies steel, aluminum, copper, electrical components, and other construction products as exposed to tariffs, and recommends that contractors and owners examine price escalation provisions when negotiating agreements. But a tariff and a price increase are not interchangeable. An imported product may carry a direct tariff, while a domestically produced competing product may face no equivalent import duty, but still increase in price as imported alternatives become more expensive. AGC's that effect is already visible in the data. Its analysis notes that although producer price indexes measure prices from domestic sellers, domestic manufacturers have largely been matching higher prices associated with imported products subject to tariffs. That creates an important contractual distinction. A provision allowing recovery of a newly imposed tariff may address the actual duty paid on an imported component. It may not automatically cover a domestic supplier raising its price because market conditions changed after competing imports became more expensive, even though the project's economic exposure can be identical. The contractual trigger can be completely different. Contractors are already passing costs through differently. The industry is not responding uniformly. AGC's 2026 Construction Hiring and Business Outlook survey found roughly 70% of contractors had been affected by tariffs. 40% responded by raising bid prices, and 35% passed most or all tariff-related costs to project owners, but only 20% reported adding price-sharing adjustments or other terms to contracts, while 11% said they absorbed most or all tariff costs themselves. That variation matters for owners evaluating bids. Two contractors bidding the same project may have made fundamentally different assumptions about future materials inflation. One may include a larger contingency in the base price. Another may submit a lower initial bid but retain contractual rights to recover specified increases later. A third may have locked in critical equipment before submitting the bid. Comparing those bids solely on initial price can obscure where the escalation risk actually sits. Data center construction makes the exposure larger. The issue becomes more significant as data center construction pulls increasing volumes of industrial equipment into the market, and the effects now extend well beyond servers and semiconductors. Manufacturers of generators, cooling systems, electrical equipment, cables, bearings, and prefabricated building components are expanding production to meet demand. Generac is investing $250 million to expand production of commercial generators, supported partly by a $1.6 billion backlog, while Siemens is investing more than $200 million in two new plants in Georgia and Texas for data center and industrial equipment, part of a broader capacity build-out already reshaping grid equipment manufacturing into a strategic industry in its own right. For construction contracts, that means commodity escalation and equipment escalation can increasingly become different problems. Steel may have a transparent market benchmark. A custom electrical component produced by a small number of factories may not, and pinning down which cost is moving can be harder still when the engineering capacity needed to finalize a project's technical specifications is itself in short supply. Owners need to know what the clause leaves behind. None of this means escalation clauses are ineffective. They can reduce the contingency contractors otherwise have to build into fixed-price bids and provide an agreed method for sharing extraordinary cost movements. The problem is assuming the existence of the clause resolves the entire issue. Before approving a major infrastructure contract, owners and procurement teams need to understand which materials are covered, which are excluded, what index establishes the baseline, how much prices must move before an adjustment occurs, and whether increases can move both upward and downward. Equipment deserves particular attention. Which transformers, switchgear, generators, and specialty systems are already priced, which remain exposed until a purchase order is issued? Are tariff increases treated differently from ordinary supplier increases? And what happens when a critical component increases substantially but is not represented by the contract's chosen index? Those questions determine whether a $10 million cost increase remains with the contractor or travels upstream to the owner. An escalation clause does not eliminate construction inflation. It creates rules for allocating it. And in a market where steel, copper, transformers, and specialty equipment are moving at different rates, the details of those rules increasingly determine what the project ultimately costs. Interested in a Soundbite sponsorship? Contact our team to learn more. Thank you for listening.